Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of The County Seat. I'm your host, Chad Booth. We're bringing you to the show today from Moab, Utah. This is in Grand County, and we are in the 11th hour of the Public Lands Initiative. This is the bill that's being worked on by Representative Chaffetz and Representative Bishop to bring some certainty to land use planning and land use in the future. Now, in this 11th hour, Grand County has put some red flags up and called a timeout. They are looking at making some changes. There are people on both sides of the issue that are very concerned that the changes they're proposing may bring economic ruin or it may bring economic prosperity. And the environment all falls into that mix. So that will be the analysis and the course of our show today. But we will start with a little background information on the Public Lands Initiative and how it relates to Utah's counties.
We have not had certainty on what is and is not going to be allowed on public lands in this end of the state for many years. The wilderness issue has been 3 decades, and we still are no closer to resolving it.
The root of the problem is the lack of certainty. Certainty for many stakeholders of the lands that see their highest and best use very differently. 2 years ago, Congressman Rob Bishop and his office began an effort to look beyond the dichotomy of wilderness versus development to a solution that would create finality for all stakeholders. The Public Lands Initiative is a Herculean effort that has brought together 120 different advocacy groups, businesses, and organizations to collaborate, compromise, and think creatively toward solutions. 500 meetings and 18 field trips have taken place where people have come together to share their ideas with a focus on conservation while still providing for economic opportunities, all while involving local participation and giving everyone a voice in the process.
The Bishop Bill is our opportunity to determine how our federal lands are used going forward. So it is the local voice planning for future use of federal lands. We get to have a say.
While each county has its own unique issues, we chose to take a closer look at what is taking place in Grand County in order to get some idea of what counties have to account for in this planning effort.
How do you provide economic diversity and jobs? How do you protect lands, protect watersheds? Wilderness, and where we would designate it and not designate it. Protection of an enhancement of our recreation economy.
While everyone we talked to seemed to understand that not everyone would get what they wanted, but everyone would get something, it seemed like those who are seeking increased opportunities for economic development are at a slight disadvantage.
We in the counties have always been aware that there is a potential that we could either get in the middle of this kind of negotiations or finish these negotiations, and the President, through the authority of the Antiquities Act, can still come in and create national monuments around what you've done. It's sort of been a little bit like a sword hanging over your head. But, I guess we could say it's been a driving force behind getting a lot of stakeholders together who in the past don't typically talk and work together.
A first draft of the Public Lands Initiative was slated for release on March 27th, but some changes have taken place since the last election. Council Chair Elizabeth Tubbs brought us up to speed on what had happened in Grand County.
The decision was made by the former council not to do a final vote on any recommendations that would be made to the congressman and to wait until the new council was seated. And so at the beginning of this year, when the new council was seated, there was an interest in reopening the discussion part of the process to allow for more public input.
You guys have got me fighting mad.
The conversation at last week's public meeting for Grand County's recommendations on the plan were as heated as a meeting almost a year prior. But the conversation has shifted. A proposed road down Sago Canyon that would have connected oil and gas development in the Uinta Basin to I-70 has been struck from the plan, along with language that would have prohibited the use of the Antiquities Act in future monument designations in the county. Despite the changes to Grand County's proposal, Elizabeth pointed out the importance of community involvement throughout the process.
If this bill becomes reality and becomes law, we will all be affected by it. And for that reason, I feel it's not just to 7 council members to make those decisions. We did have public input before, primarily via letters. We had a public forum last year that was a little bit contentious.
It's important to know that these are some very complex issues, and as you may have gathered from public comments tonight, they're very emotional issues for people.
The Grand County Council is planning to submit their recommendations for the Public Lands Initiative by March 31st, and a first draft should be available in the coming weeks. For the county seat, I'm Derek Dowsett.
Well, that should bring you up to speed on the Public Lands Initiative. We are going to continue our conversation on the other side of the break at the Grand County Courthouse here on the county seat.
There are a couple great things about the Uinta Basin. One is it's still small, it's community.
That makes you feel like when you go somewhere, you know everybody.
When you know your neighbor knows you, and you can trust each other. People look out for one another.
I grew up in the Uinta Basin, and I think that it's a good place to raise a family.
So we packed up our 3 kids, and here we came to Uinta County, and what a great place it was.
It's not too big, it's not too small.
And it has a lot to offer that you just don't get in the big city anymore.
Remember those good old days? The places you went with your family when you were young? Reinvest in those old memories by making new ones. Beaver County is the perfect place to start that new tradition. Enjoy your favorite pastimes with family and friends. Connect with the history and culture of Utah in a place that's looking to the future. Modern conveniences minus the hustle and bustle of other locales. Beaver County, your adventure starts here.
Color, it's something that can be seen. But have you ever wanted to reach out and touch it? Experience it. In San Juan County, Utah, color comes to life like nowhere else on earth. Color can be more than an abstract. Color can be your gateway to a new world. Visit San Juan County and explore the past, present, and future in a way that you've only dreamed of. San Juan County. Color your experience.
Imagine a unique, breathtaking cascade misting into the deep pool below. A world-renowned national scenic byway that snakes through some of the greatest views in the world. A canyon painted red by the hands of time. A land that brings the Wild West back to life. And it's all in one amazing place. Here's some advice when visiting Bryce Canyon Country. Take your time.
Welcome back to the county seat. We are engaged in a conversation today about the Public Lands Initiative. This is the Bishop Chaffetz collaborative effort to come up with some permanence in land planning, and the fact that some of the counties, a couple of the counties involved in this process, have come back to revisit what they had initially planned. So we're joined today for our conversation with a Grand County Councilman, Lynn Jackson. We have Colin Fryer, who is safe to say, a local outfitter, businessman, and a rancher, and Marion DeLay, who is the Director of Tourism for the Moab Area Travel Council. Is this review a good thing for Grand County?
I think it's a good thing for a couple of new councilmen who are fairly new to the process of public land management. We're really kind of re-going over a lot of the same types of input that we received last year, but it's giving them a little more in-depth background of what the substance was and what the rationale was for some of those reasons. So, you know, in general, it's always good to provide your residents and your public with an opportunity for input. So the input has broadened a little bit. In Grand County, we have quite a few residents who belong to conservation communities, Southern Utah Wilderness Alliance, Grand Canyon Trust, and Sierra Club. And so the process started out, this new process, with hearing presentations from organized groups. And from there, it's kind of actually grown to where these broader groups, through the residents in Grand County, seem to be having quite a bit of input. Tonight, we're going to have a public meeting and kind of bring it back to hearing from our residents.
Tourism and recreation are extremely important to your county, and I think everybody acknowledges that. Do you feel that it would be a good mix for this county, and there may be some divergence of thought within this panel about this, that it become the main or major or only driving economy within the county?
I came here a little over 20 years ago, 22 years ago, and Moab at that time was in the bus stage of a mineral extraction business. Half of Main Street was boarded up. Half of the houses in town were vacant and for sale. There were very few jobs, and the jobs that they were kind of either in the government sector or just in some kind of low-end subsistence kind of tourism. Since then, I've witnessed a resurgence in Moab, and that resurgence has taken us 20 years to get to a point now where our 2 national parks are our solid anchors that keep us noteworthy to the world and to the nation and to our state. And those 2 national parks are important when you see what's happened to the visitation over the years. We've gone from a town that was barely alive to now a town that's very vibrant, and we're the envy of many counties and many countries around the world because we've taken our tourism and made it almost a year-round business now. We're a 9-month and going on a 10-month business.
If you became a recreation county, would that still be a threat?
No, not at all. I think that that there are elements on both sides of an argument that get extreme. For my part and for the people I know in the tourism business, we're somewhere in the middle. We think that there's certainly the amount of acreage we're talking about and the vast expanse of country out there and the diversity of that country lends itself to a lot of tourism kind of activities, but there's also some area out there that needs to be set aside for mineral extraction for the benefit of our country and our children in the future. There's some area out there where the roads need to stay open for the recreationalists and the people that are wanting to participate in that kind of activity. There's got to be some open space where people can get away from things, and there's plenty of that.
Yes, Mary.
I was just going to say, it's interesting that you asked the question in the way that you did. It's like, what would happen? Is it such a bad thing if it becomes tourism and recreation? Because for so long we have been primarily, the economy here has primarily been sustained on the heels of tourism industry and the recreation businesses, the outfitters that are doing really well in the community. So it's interesting that you asked the question that way. And I agree with him that there is a way to have a balance, and there are certain things that we have to have and diversification that we have to be a sustainable and vibrant community. But it has always been a tourism community.
Well, at least for 20 some odd, 30 some odd years.
Oh, that would be my tenure.
Yeah, it really started turning a corner in the early 90s with the advent of mountain biking, I think, is kind of what put us on a map. But as Colin says, it's shown to be a fairly steady economy. It slowed a little bit in 2008 and 2009. It didn't go down, it slowed a little bit, but for the most part, it's our base economy. We're glad to have it. And part of what we're doing with the PLI, the Public Lands Initiative, is along the lines of what Colin said. We're trying to find that balance of areas that are where you can have some different types of growth, economic growth, and areas you should set aside for wilderness and motorized recreation, et cetera.
So we're going to take a break right now from the county seat. We'll come back and pick up this conversation about the Public Lands Initiative and Grand County's participation in it, and their rethinking the process at this stage of the game. We'll be right back.
What would you do with an extra day in Utah Valley? Explore the Wasatch Mountains? Snap a family photo at Bridal Veil Falls. Cool off on Utah Lake or the Provo River. No matter what you're searching for, you can find it in Utah Valley. Bring everyone together.
We all assume that the food we eat is safe, but how do you know? Well, it starts on the farm and continues every step of the way to your local grocery store. So when you bring home food, you do so with the peace of mind that it's safe, fresh, and nutritious thanks to the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food, the guardians of Utah's food supply and sustainable agriculture. Learn more by visiting ag.utah.gov.
You go through the day-to-day repeating what you did yesterday. Don't you wish you could access that piece of your life that's missing? Find the beauty, serenity, family fun, or anything else that's missing from your life in the Cedar City Bryan Head area. Gain access to your adventure, whether it's camping, hiking, the arts, festivals, or just a getaway. Visit cedarcityayl.com for details on all the adventures that you can access in scenic southern Utah.
Kanab, base camp for your southern Utah adventures. You belong in Kanab.
Welcome back to the county seat. We're talking today about the Public Lands Initiative and how Grand County is taking a review of that before they submit their final recommendations to the Congressman's office. Colin, I wanted to go back because you're both a rancher and an outfitter, so you deal in the tourism economy and in the ranching economy. Are you concerned that ranching very easily could get squeezed in this review process?
Well, absolutely, that's a concern, and that's part of the point I was trying to make, is that it's a lot of land out there and there's room for everybody. And having ranching in my background, and it's truly my favorite job, I'm very sensitive to the fact that the industry, the old ranching industry, is being squeezed from a number of different directions. So appropriate question that needs to be answered as we're going through this process is first of all, are we going to make room for those ranchers? Are they going to be able to continue to graze? Because grazing on the public lands is the lifeblood of Western ranching, and so I'd encourage the decision makers to keep that as one of the top most important topics as they make those decisions.
And we are, in fact, keeping most of, should be very little impact on grazing coming out of the plan. You know, grazing to me is one of those industries that sort of is part of your custom and culture of some of our rural towns. And to me, that's, as an elected official, that's important. I moved to Moab in 1982, and this was a mining town, and I lived through the bust that Colin referred to. So we just want to make sure that as we move forward with economic development and our tourism industry, that we try to retain some part of the culture that this town had for ever since it was established in 1870, and that's a challenge.
There is some concern in one other constituency, in motorized recreation, that there's now talk of road closures, and I think that they had signed off on the initial plan because there was supposed to be no net loss of off-road routes, and some of it is now couched in phrases like no Jeep safari routes will be targeted, but that there are road closures that are being discussed. Do you see that as, because that is part of your tourism community, Marion, do you see that as a potential boondoggle?
Well, we already have people calling us and asking us that very question. You know, we hear that this is going on, and what are they going to close? Is it going to be similar to what just recently happened in the LaSalle's, where they closed off certain spurs and that sort of thing? So without a list of what they're actually going to close off, it's hard for us to answer them. And the response that we get from the visitor is just that, well, we hope that someone is down there fighting for the Jeep industry, because the Jeep industry has been in Moab and has been what has been helping to sustain Grand County for years and years. So that's the input that I can give you as far as the industry goes. But I will say that the Jeeping businesses have been here, they've ridden it out, and they have supported this community for a lot of years.
Can you create a Sedona or a Vail or a resort community that becomes unattainable for people to actually live there as participating members of the community?
If I may just quickly, I don't think it's the tourism and recreation industry per se that drives those housing prices. What happens is if you live in a rural community that has the type of natural beauty that we have here, what you start attracting are second homeowners, and that, in my opinion, is what has over the years kind of started driving our housing prices up, and I think ultimately you can turn into an area like a Sedona where it's pretty pricey, and the workers have to live in bedroom communities, and so we're wrestling with those issues right now.
And we have a condominium community rental pool that is primarily, over 50% of it is owned by out-of-town owners. So they're not there, they're renting them out, and that's what's driving that. Just like he says, I agree with him.
Yeah, and people buying older homes and turning them into overnight rentals is an issue.
But I can say as an employer in this town with a fair number of employees that at this point we're not really in that danger. I have employee housing for my employees. I'm continuing to accumulate it as time goes by. A lot of older properties are now getting refurbished a little bit, and I can say for sure that our county officials and our city officials that used to be a little bit more strict on some of the building codes and what they were going to allow for employees housing have now relaxed some of those regulations, because before they were so strict, they were requiring buildings that were hard to beat or hard to build and still be financially sound as employee housing.
But is that employee housing as you provide it as a part of the job, or is it something that they can buy?
It can be both. We have two kinds of employees. When we have the real busier time right in the middle of the summer, there's a lot of kind of, if you will, college students or kind of transient workers that come for 90 days, and for them they're just looking for a place to stay for that short period of time, and their housing needs aren't as much. But then on the other hand, we have a lot of people that are supporting families and raising families that are here in tourism jobs. They can make enough money to buy a home in this town right now.
Excellent. We've kind of gone a little over time. We're going to go to another break. We'll come back and wrap up our conversation here in Grand County. We'll be right back.
Planning your next conference or corporate event? The Davis Conference Center offers 70,000 square feet of flexible meeting and exhibit space, plus high-tech audio-visual services that will make your event a success. Whether you're planning a training, meeting, company retreat, wedding, or large convention, let the staff at the Davis Conference Center help you arrange your next event. Located east of I-15 in Layton, call 801-416-8888 or visit davisconferencecenter.com today. Landscapes as diverse as the people who venture to find them await. All you have to do is find a place to begin. Moab, Utah, in Grand County, where adventure begins.
There is a place where young and old make connections, where kids feel like grown-ups, and grown-ups feel like kids. There is a place where beauty arises in contrast, where wonder is universal, and laughter second nature. There is a place where friends find a future, families find each other, and feelings find their home. There is a place.
Welcome back. We are talking about the Public Lands Initiative and Grand County being involved in a review of it. I just thought I would ask the question, what opportunities, what benefits do you each envision if the PLI moves forward and kind of finalizes things and sets some stability? What advantages and opportunities that hold for Grand County?
There's two potentials. One is a potential to make land use so restrictive that you by default will just have the recreation tourism economy for your background. And we've discussed that's not bad, but we could, if we're not careful, eliminate that potential for diversity and extra income into our county coffers. On the plus side, which is where we're hoping to get, is it provides a level of stability for a business owner who is looking at relocating into Grand County. He can develop a business that relies on some trail system or creating new trails, and he can sell and market that business and not have the worry that in 2 years down the road he goes out someday and there's an oil pad in the middle of where he used to take his customers. So it provides some stability for our small oil industry, for potential potash industry, in addition to our recreation industry, to make long-term investments.
As an outfitter, what's your take on that?
Again, along Glenn's lines, stability is the key, and it also provides a structure where people can decide what they're going to do and where they're going to do it, so that the oil and gas guys know where they can go, the recreational people know where they can go. My pet project, the national parks, are going to know that they have a buffer zone around them, and that the grazing guys keep grazing, and that we can mesh all this stuff together and everybody can get pretty much what they want. And I think the common denominator is we have to share, because if we don't share, then we're probably not going to get anything.
With this will allow opportunities to label recreational areas, recreation districts, recreation,
Exactly.
so I can say this is the Colorado Recreation Area instead of the Colorado River. It's the Colorado Recreation Area, which will then enhance that ability for those businesses that are coming in to be able to grow that business that he's talking about. So for me, part of it is that whole balance. Again, like Colin is saying, I totally agree with that. The other part is marketability. It will help increase marketability in some ways.
Moab, as an elected official, Moab, I see it as we're at a bit of a crossroads on how we move forward and maintain a good, viable, steady recreation and tourism economy, but make sure it provides for all our citizens, for housing and the jobs they need, and wherever we have the opportunity to diversify a little bit in our economic world, that's kind of my goal. So it's not easy. We have a very divisive community in some cases, but we are trying our best to work together.
As from our standpoint, those stakeholders are extremely important to what we're doing in this community, and to continue to have a viable tourism economic situation, we really do have to have those stakeholders and listen to their voice and hear their voice, and just make sure that they're heard in this process. And I think the process has been good. Excellent. Daunting, but good. It has been. It's been a long process.
Thank you so much for joining us on the county seat. Remember, local government is where your life happens. Be part of the solution. Please get involved. Please tell your friends about our program and the issues that we talk about here. Make it a point of conversation. We'll see you next week on the county seat. If you like this video, then we invite you to subscribe to our channel, The County Seat. You can do that here. And we invite you to share with your friends. We also invite you to get all the latest up-to-date information by following us on our social media channels. And if all else fails, make sure that you watch The County Seat Sunday morning at 8:30 right here on ABC4